The Atlantic Ocean, November 14th. 300 miles from any coastline, Captain James Morrison had been at sea for 23 years. He'd seen storms that could snap a ship in half. He'd navigated through fog so thick you couldn't see your own hands. But he'd never seen anything like this. A ship, dead in the water. No lights, no movement. Just drifting. His salvage crew had picked up the distress beacon 2 days ago. But when they arrived at the coordinates, there was no distress, no crew calling for help. Just silence. And that's when Morrison made the biggest mistake of his life. He decided to board it. The vessel was called the Persephone, a cargo ship registered out of Rotterdam. According to Maritime records, it had left port 6 weeks ago, heading for New York. It never arrived. Morrison's crew circled the ship twice before attempting to board. The Persephone sat low in the water, tilting slightly to starboard. Rust streaked down her black hull like dried blood. Her deck was empty. The cargo containers stacked on top showed no signs of damage. "Looks abandoned," said Chen, Morrison's first mate. "Could be a dozen reasons. Engine failure, crew evacuation. Then where's the lifeboat?" Morrison interrupted. Chen fell silent. He was right. The lifeboat was still secured to the deck. If the crew had abandoned ship, they would have taken it. Morrison grabbed his radio. "This is salvage vessel Seabound requesting permission to board derelict vessel Persephone. No signs of crew. Appears to be abandoned." The response came back crackling with static. "Permission granted, Seabound. Proceed with caution. Document everything." 4 crew members volunteered to board Morrison Chun, a young engineer named Sarah Mitchell, and their security officer, Rodriguez. They approached in a small motorboat, the sound of their engine impossibly loud in the stillness. As they climbed the rusted ladder up the side of the Persephone, Morrison noticed something strange. The metal rungs were cold. Too cold for November. Like touching ice, the deck was worse than it looked from a distance. Everything was covered in a thin layer of frost, despite the temperature being well above freezing. Their breath came out in clouds. "Why is it so cold?" Sarah asked, wrapping her arms around herself. Rodriguez checked his thermometer. 38 degrees, that's impossible. It's 60 degrees out here. Morrison moved toward the bridge, his boots crunching on the frost-covered deck. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open and the hinges screamed in protest. Inside, the bridge was a mess. Papers scattered everywhere. Coffee cups knocked over, their contents long dried. The radio equipment was still on, lights blinking in the darkness. But no one was there. Chen picked up the ship's log from the floor. He flipped through the pages, his expression growing darker with each entry. "Captain, you need to see this." Morrison took the log. The last entry was dated 3 weeks ago. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible. "Day 19. It's in the cargo hold. We tried to contain it. We failed. Most of the crew is gone now. If you're reading this, don't go below deck. Whatever you do, don't open the cargo hold. Just sink the ship. Burn it. Do whatever it takes. Just don't let it reach." The entry ended mid-sentence. "What the hell does that mean?" Sarah whispered. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Rodriguez radioed the Seabound. "Tell them we're coming back. We're not." A sound echoed through the ship. A deep, resonating boom, like metal being struck from the inside. It came from below deck. Everyone froze. "Did you hear that?" Chen asked. Another boom. "Closer this time. We need to leave." "Now," Rodriguez said, his hand moving to his sidearm, but Morrison's curiosity had always been stronger than his fear. That's what made him a good salvage captain. And a foolish man. "We're already here," he said. "Whatever's down there, we need to know what we're dealing with. 5 minutes. We check the cargo hold, take photos, and leave." "Captain, that's 5 minutes." Morrison repeated. The stairwell leading below deck was pitch black. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing walls slick with condensation. The temperature dropped with every step they took. The cargo hold door was at the end of a long corridor. Even from a distance, Morrison could see that something was wrong with it. The metal was warped, bulging outward. As if something had been trying to break through from the inside, deep scratches covered the surface. Not scratches, claw marks. Dozens of them running in frantic patterns across the door. "Jesus Christ?" Sarah breathed. What could do that to solid steel? Morrison stepped closer, his flashlight beam dancing across the damaged metal. That's when he noticed the handprints. Dozens of them, pressed into the frost that covered the door. Small hands, large hands, all desperately reaching, clawing, trying to escape. The door handle was frozen solid. Morrison pulled at it, but it wouldn't budge. "Help me with this," he said to Rodriguez. "Captain, maybe we should, now." Together, they pulled. The ice cracked. The handle turned with a sound like breaking bones. and then the door began to open. A blast of cold air hit them, so intense it felt like knives against their skin. The temperature inside the cargo hold had to be below zero. Frost covered every surface, making the interior look like a frozen cave. And then they saw what was inside. Cargo containers, stacked 3 high, all of them covered in that same frost. But one container at the far end was different. The doors were bent outward, hanging off their hinges. Whatever had been inside was gone. Morrison's flashlight beam swept across the space. That's when he saw the writing on the walls, messages carved into the ice. "I K-O-Ot? Atiao? Lady I-N-S-I-D-A-O. Captain." Chen's voice was shaking. "Look at the floor." Morrison turned his light downward. Drag marks. Leading from the open container to the door where they stood. Recent drag marks. The ice had barely begun to reform over them. "Whatever was in that container," Chen whispered, "it's not in here anymore." They searched the rest of the ship in growing panic. Every room was empty. Every corridor abandoned. But in the crew quarters, they found something that made Morrison's blood run cold. 23 beds. All of them occupied. The crew of the Persephone hadn't abandoned ship. They were still here. Still in their beds. Eyes open. Mouths frozen in silent screams. Their bodies covered in the same frost that coated everything else. Sarah stumbled backward, retching. Rodriguez crossed himself, whispering a prayer in Spanish. "Want need to leave," Morrison said, his voice barely a whisper. Right now, they ran. Through the corridors, up the stairs, across the frost-covered deck. The motorboat was exactly where they'd left it, bobbing gently in the water beside the Persephone. As they climbed down the ladder, Morrison looked back at the ship one last time. That's when he saw it. A figure standing on the deck, watching them. It looked human. Almost. But something about the way it stood, the way it moved. "G.O.!" Morrison screamed. "Start TNGO!" The motorboat roared to life. They pulled away from the Persephone, racing back toward the Seabound. Morrison never took his eyes off the figure on the deck. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching them leave. When they were 50 feet away, the figure raised one hand. Not waving, pointing at their boat. And then Morrison realized their mistake. They hadn't just boarded the ship. They'd opened the cargo hold. They'd let whatever was in there know they existed. And now it knew where they were going. "How long have we been aboard the Persephone?" Morrison asked, his voice shaking. Chen checked his watch. 23 minutes, thought. Morrison pulled out his radio. "Seabound, this is Morrison. We're coming back. Prepare to leave immediately. Don't ask questions." Just the radio crackled to life. But the voice that came through wasn't the Seabound's communications officer. It was different. Wrong. Like multiple voices speaking at once. "Too late, Captain Morrison. We're already aboard." Morrison looked at the Seabound in the distance. Every light on the ship flickered once. Twice. And then went dark. The motorboat drifted in the space between 2 dead ships. Behind them, the Persephone sat in the water like a tomb. Ahead, the Seabound was dark and silent. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice small and frightened. Morrison stared at his ship. His crew of 12 was on that vessel. 12 people who had no idea what was coming for them. Or maybe they already knew. Maybe it was already too late. Rodriguez raised his sidearm, checking the magazine. "We have to go back. We have to warn them." "And if we can't?" Chen asked. "If whatever killed the Persephone's crew is already on the Seabound." Morrison didn't have an answer. He was a salvage captain. He recovered abandoned ships. He didn't fight whatever this was. The radio crackled again. This time it was a voice Morrison recognized. His communications officer, Williams. "Captain. Captain, are you there? Something's wrong. The temperature in the engine room just dropped to freezing. And there's someone." The transmission cut to static. Morrison made a decision. "We're going back. We're getting our crew, and we're getting off these ships, all of us. And if we can't?" Sarah asked. Morrison started the engine. "Then we make sure whatever's on those ships doesn't reach land." As they headed toward the Seabound, Morrison looked back one last time at the Persephone. The figure was gone from the deck, but in the cargo hold, just visible through the open door, something moved in the darkness. Something that had been waiting. Something that was finally free. And it was hungry.